Some restaurants on their menu will have what they call a sampler. It has a little bit of several different food items. Alan Black, in speaking of our text, says that Mark follows his sampler of Jesus' teaching in parables with a sampler of Jesus' miraculous powers. As Tommy South says, we have already been introduced to Jesus the miracle worker, since Mark earlier recorded his power in casting out the evil spirit in the synagogue at Capernaum, the healing of a leper and a lame man, the numerous other occasions of healing, but none of these, Tommy says, quite compare with the miraculous deeds recorded in chapter 5, partly because some of them are so unusual and spectacular in nature, and partly because they are recorded in such detail. I think Tommy would not object if we added the miracle recorded at the end of chapter 4 to that list. Wendell Willis said these narratives are more vivid than the earlier ones given, describing Jesus' work because they provide more detail. This section of Mark is his best overview of the range of Jesus' miraculous power. Mark's gospel presents Jesus as a victor over the destructive forces of nature, over disease, demons, death, and moral spiritual darkness, the one and only deliverer. That statement was made by William Hendrickson, gives us our title today, Jesus is the one and only deliverer. Our text this morning is from Mark chapter 4, beginning with verse 35, and going down through chapter 5, verse 43. We first see that Jesus delivers from the storm, verses 35 through 41 of chapter 4. That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, let us go over to the other side. Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, Teacher, don't you care if we drowned? He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, Quiet, be still. Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? They were terrified and asked each other, Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. Jesus is going to be on the lake, on the Sea of Galilee, 5 different times in Mark chapter 4 through 8. It was kind of there in the center of things, and the easiest way to get to new locations was to cross the lake. However, storms could very quickly develop on the lake. The wind gusts would come down from the valley and whip across the lake. Here we have the scene set before us. The day is coming to the close. Jesus said, let's go over to the other side of the lake. So they left the crowd behind. They get in the boat. Mark gives some interesting little details. There were other boats with them. But then the storm comes up. Now, Jesus is taking advantage of the boat ride. He is asleep. He's getting some much needed sleep. We read elsewhere in the gospel there were times they couldn't even get rest or have time to eat. But here he is asleep and a storm is going on, and the disciples are afraid they're actually going to drown. Well, Jesus, when he is awakened, gets up, says to the waves, Quiet, be still, or peace, be still. Jesus addressed inanimate objects. He addressed what we usually would call nature. We need to remember that God created nature. But he speaks, and with those words, immediately the storm is gone. The winds die down. You have a calm sea. Jesus says to the disciples, Why are you so afraid? Why are you so afraid? Are you still without faith? Well, this is one of many clues we have that Even the 12 did not fully understand who Jesus was. They had seen numerous miracles. They had been with Jesus, but they still did not realize just who he was. In fact, they are terrified. They're scared. And they ask each other, well, just who is this? What kind of a person is this? He can even command the wind and the waves. You know, this story would be great encouragement for Roman Christians, the first readers of the gospel. They knew having Jesus with them did not exempt them from the storms, but he did offer them peace. Well, next we read that Jesus delivers from demons, verses 1 through 20 of chapter 5. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him. The man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Swear to God that you won't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the evil spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside. And the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. This is perhaps the most dramatic exorcism story of all in the New Testament. Even Mark, the master painter, has given us few pictures which will compare with this in vividness and terror and majesty and power. The ministry of Jesus is marked by many cases of demon possession and their cure, but none is related with such detail and fullness as this of the pitiful man who meets our Lord as he lands with his disciples on the eastern shore of the lake. If the scene terrifies us by revealing dread forces of evil, much more should it inspire us by its vision of the omnipotent strength of Christ. That was the observation of Charles Erdman. Well, Jesus has made it across the lake. He's taking care of the storm. They arrive on the other side of the lake. They're in the region, some translations say Gerasenes, others have different readings. Basically, the word there is from a Hebrew term meaning foreigners. This was a region that was populated mostly by Gentiles. There were only a small percentage of Jews there. And the reference alerts us to the fact that Jesus is now in predominantly Gentile territory. That helps to explain some of the details that follow it, especially the presence of pigs. it marks out the region as a place of uncleanness. This is further heightened by what happens when Jesus exits the boat. Jesus gets out of the boat. There is a man who greets him. This man is described as one with an evil spirit. He is demon-possessed. This man, because of his demon possession, is totally out of control. Nobody can keep him in check. And so he basically lives out by himself. He cannot be with others. Nobody was able to control him. But this man, although demon-possessed, sees Jesus and comes and falls on his knees in front of him. The demon, as the other demons have that we've already seen, know who Jesus is. At this point in the gospel, the demons know who Jesus is. God knows who Jesus is, of course. Most of the people don't really know just who Jesus is. Even the 12 don't understand who he is. But he addresses Jesus as Jesus, Son of the Most High God. And the demon, and we find out that really there are several demons because they're legion. They are concerned. They know that Jesus can cast them out. They don't have any control. They can't refuse what Jesus commands them to do. But they're concerned about where they will end up. They ask to be cast into the pigs. And Jesus allows that. Well, apparently, pigs cannot handle demon possession at all. They seek the immediate relief of going into the lake and drowning. What is interesting is the reaction of people. There's a good thing happens. The demons have left the man. He's now normal. He's sitting there in his right mind. He is no longer a threat. The other people who see this, though, have some different reactions. There is concern. Who is this person who can do what we've just seen? There's probably concern because 2,000 pigs have now drowned themselves. That's quite a loss of livestock, of livelihood. But Jesus has once again demonstrated his power over Satan because the demons are under the service of Satan. Now, in our modern day, we've had different thoughts. Okay, just what were these demons? And we're lacking in some information, certainly. Some have equated it with mental illness, but I don't think that equates. The man who met Jesus was not a maniac, but a demoniac. He was under the control of these demons. And when Jesus removed the demons, he was normal. He even wanted to go with Jesus. The reaction of the others is that they're afraid. They're afraid to have a man of such remarkable powers to remain among them. And as one said, they preferred their swine to the Savior. They thought more of the loss they had sustained than of the soul that had been saved. The man himself, as I said, wants to join Jesus. But Jesus says, no, you go to your family and tell them what has happened to you, what the Lord has done for you. Now, if we remember, that's different than what Jesus has said on previous occasions. He has healed people. He said, don't tell anybody what I've done. Well, what's the difference? Well, Jesus is on the other side of the lake. He is in Gentile territory. He doesn't need publicity back among the Jews, but he needs to be made known in this land. And so this man who has had the demon cast out of him does spread the word throughout the Decapolis. That's the area on the other side of the lake, the Gentile area. And when he told what had happened to him, all the people were amazed. We next see that Jesus delivers from disease and death, verses 41 through verse 21 through verse 43. And here we have, as we had seen on an earlier occasion, what we would call a sandwich. We have a story that begins about one thing, And then in the middle, there's a story about something else. And then the account returns to the first story. So it's called a sandwich. One would not be complete without the other. But this current series of 4 miracles, as Earl Macmillan says, is made complete by 2 which are intertwined in such a way that it does them a disservice to separate them. Read with me. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. He's back over where people are always watching for him. Then one of the synagogue rulers named Jairus came there. Seeing Jesus, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him. "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her, so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, "If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed." Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet and said, trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." While Jesus was still speaking, some men came from the home of Jairus, the synagogue ruler. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Ignoring what they said, Jesus told the synagogue ruler, "Don't be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue ruler, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha kum," which means, "Little child girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately the girl stood up and walked around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this, and he told them to give her something to eat. Here we see, once again, that Jesus can deliver from disease, and we even see that he can deliver from death. We have the synagogue ruler. He comes out of the crowd. He asked Jesus to come and heal his daughter. She's been sick for a good while. And so we don't have any reply of Jesus, but he begins to go on his way to the house of Jairus to heal his daughter. As he goes along, the crowd follows. They're pressed around him. Nobody is practicing social distancing here. They are close together. It's probably more like the scene we saw where a lot of people were injured the other day because they got into too close a space. But he's going along. People are pressed up against him. And here's this woman. And what a sad case she is. She has been sick for 12 years. Some kind of a internal bleeding. She spent all of her money on the doctors. They haven't helped her. It's only gotten worse. Let's keep in mind that because she had this problem of the hemorrhage, that she was basically unclean. That would limit whatever participation in worship she wanted to do. But she had heard about Jesus, and she said, if I can just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Now, we read in other situations where people were healed just by touching Jesus. Well, she touched Jesus. Immediately, she realized that she had been healed. And when she touched Jesus, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around, he said, who touched my clothes? The disciple said, what do you mean, who touched you? Who touched you? Everybody is touching everybody here. We're in a crowd. Now, Jesus knew who touched him. He didn't have to ask for information. He knew. He knew the thoughts of all men. But this was for the benefit of the woman and for the others around. The woman, knowing what had happened to her, came, fell at his feet. She was trembling with fear. Okay, yes, I touched you. Was that a bad thing? But she told Jesus the whole truth. He says, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. Jesus commended the woman for her faith. The woman was both fearful and faithful, but her faith overcame her fear, and for that she was blessed. Well, then Jesus is going to go on to the house of the synagogue ruler and heal the daughter. But word comes, don't bother him. He doesn't need to come. The daughter's died. Well, Jesus doesn't listen to that. He continues on his way. It says he ignored it. He says, don't be afraid. He says this to the synagogue ruler. Don't be afraid, just believe. And for the first time in the gospel record, Jesus picks out Peter, James, and John out of the 12, and they get to go with Jesus to witness this miracle. This will occur 3 times in Mark's gospel. Jesus comes to the house. He encounters the mourners. Now, in that day, as still in today in that part of the world, if you don't have enough mourners, you just hire extra. The people will cry for a living. These people are, they're wailing and, obvious mourning. And Jesus says, she's not dead, she's asleep. Their response, which indicates some of them must have been professional mourners, was they laughed. What do you mean she's asleep? She's dead. Well, he puts all of them out. He takes the child's parents. He takes the 3. They go into where the child is. He takes her by the hand. Touching was often a part of the healing process. And he says to her, Talitha cum. Now, those are not magic words. That's the language of the time. Mark uses those words, but then he translates it. It means, little girl, I say to you, get up. Immediately, she stood up. Immediately, she came back to life. She walked around. She was completely well. Mark gives us the little detail. She was 12 years old. Well, those who saw this were astonished. I guess so. Now, this is the only account in Mark's gospel of Jesus raising someone from the dead. The other gospels give us other instances of his power over death. And on this occasion, we're back on this side of the lake. So Jesus says, don't tell anybody about this. As we've seen before, he does that because the crowds are so numerous already that he can't even find time hardly for prayer and for rest. But we have here account of 2 great miracles of healing. In fact, not only healing, but of deliverance from death. Mark's gospel, we believe, was written for Romans. And the Romans were interested in action, power, conquest. Well, Jesus here has demonstrated his power over nature, over demons, over disease, and over death. In a world that sometimes seems out of control, we must remember the power of Jesus. No one, no thing is a match for Jesus. Let us not forget who our Savior is.